and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about The Electric State. Now, this one is a new sci-fi adventure film starring Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt. For those of you who are not familiar with The Electric State, this one is generating quite a lot of buzz for the fact that I think the critic score is 15% right now as I am recording this, and I think the audience score is hovering somewhere around 74%. This one is a retro futuristic 1990s setting where we have gone to war with robotics created by Walt Disney, of all people. And we've kind of outlawed robotics, even though in this film there are sort of human-controlled robotics. I'm not sure why that is a difference. I don't know if maybe they explained it and I just glossed over it while I was watching this film, but it is a story of Millie Bobby Brown's character who runs into a robot who is telling her that this is her younger brother, who she has thought for most of this time has been deceased. And she joins up with Chris Pratt in order to go find him in this no-no land where he is being held captive. Now, I will say, I don't think that Electric State was a fantastic film. I don't think that it was terrible. I'm not sure that it is deserving of the 15% Rotten Tomatoes score. I think it's mediocre. I think it's a fine movie. I don't know that it should be mediocre considering that it was a $320 million budgeted film. But I will say the cast of this movie makes me think that the majority of that $320 million probably went to pay a lot of the salaries of the stars that are in this film. You know, we've got Chris Pratt is in this, Stanley Tucci, Anthony Mackie, Woody Harrelson, Giancarlo Esposito. I mean, the list goes on and on. They do have a lot of bigger named actors in this one, which also sort of surprises me considering that I don't think that the script is all that great. Now, The Electric State is an adaptation of a book, but a book I have not read. So I do not know if the book itself is somewhat mediocre and then they made a film which is also somewhat mediocre. My guess is the book probably makes a heck of a lot more sense than the film. And I will say, I think that there are a lot of good qualities to this movie in terms of the story and kind of what you get out of it. I think if you are looking for a mostly family-friendly movie night flick to sit down and watch, this one is probably fine. I don't think you should expect anything great. It's not, the worst thing. It certainly is no Borderlands, which is what I immediately thought of when I saw the movie poster for this one, as I immediately thought it was going to be another really trashy Borderlands. And this one was definitely a step up from that, but it wasn't one that I enjoyed. I do think it was about 30 or so minutes too long. It does tend to drag in some places. I do think that there are a lot of moments that they could have cut out of this. I'm not also the biggest fan of Millie Bobby Brown. I don't think she's all that great of an actress. I did enjoy her in Stranger Things, but it's hard to know whether or not she's a really good actress in Stranger Things because the majority of the time, she either is not talking at all or she's just sort of a bratty little kid, and that's kind of normal for that sort of thing. Like, she wasn't the character in Stranger Things that stood out the most to me in that show, if that makes sense. And I do think that they tend to pair her a lot with some bigger name people. Like, she's played opposite of Chris Pratt in this. She's played opposite of Henry Cavill in another film of hers. And so I do kind of almost think that she just ends up getting paired with people who can draw in the audience, and then she's going along for the ride. Like, I've only seen one film of hers where she was like the main character and there wasn't someone huge playing opposite of her, and I thought that that movie was pretty terrible. So I don't know that she can hold her own yet, or I haven't seen it yet, holding her own as a, draw for a film or a reason why I would tune in to that movie. It was a lot of the other people in Electric State that made me even sit down to watch this one in the first place. I was not a fan of this one, but again, I do think it's more of one of those like family movie night type of situations, which I don't really do. So I don't think that this is one that you will regret watching. It's really going to depend on what you enjoy. The CGI in this one is okay. There are some pretty interesting sort of moments that they do in this. Like I liked some of the robot creation and some of the robot stuff that happens in this. It's kind of just the combination of the two where there is some lag, if that makes sense. So it's like the human aspect of it and the robot aspect of it doesn't always sync in a way that I feel like works well for this film. It is the Russo brothers. That is not something that gets me to tune into a movie either. I think that they also have done like The Gray Man, which was a bigger budgeted film with some bigger actors in it, which was a giant flop and which I hated. So I don't know that they're much of a draw for me just personally anymore. But the Electric State, I think, is fine. It's, again, it's mediocre. If you are tuning into it expecting great things, you are probably going to be disappointed. But if you're tuning into it just looking for something that is, mildly entertaining, I think that you will have a perfectly good time. It's really, like I said, going to depend on what you enjoy, what you like seeing in a film as to whether or not the Electric State is going to be for you. But those are my thoughts on the Electric State. I would love to know what you guys thought of this film if you have seen it. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.